Chris Stevens, and I'm the front of house engineer for Jason Aldean. I got into doing sound. I started actually in like middle school doing sound at my church, and I was fortunate to go to like a really big church that was really production minded, and so I got a lot of experience really early on, middle school and high school, doing larger scale productions in that environment. And then I went to college in Nashville at Belmont University, a music business program there that was tailored to engineering, and then stayed in Nashville and started working, started touring even when I was in college, and kind of been doing it ever since. Before working for Jason, I was with Winona for about 2 years, and then I was with Michael McDonald for about 2.5 years after that, and then at the same time for Amy Grant for a while, and Stephen Curtis Chapman, and then in 2009 I started with Jason, and I've been with him for 6 years now. In transitioning, we were very fortunate to be able to bring the console out while we were using our old system, record a couple nights of shows with it, take it back to Nashville and sit in the shop and work solid week, every day, kind of digging in and getting to really get everything settled before we even really had the band. And we had blocked off 2 whole days to just get this new console system integrated and get monitor mixes set up and get everything done. And that week or 2 of time that we spent ahead of time ended up, the band came in, like, all right, everybody all right, I got my ears set up. All right, well, let's play a song and just see what happens. They played one song all the way through, stopped, can you pan this a tiny bit and turn this down a tiny bit? We made, Evan made a couple very, very small changes, and all right, well, let's do one more and run another song. And then when that was done, it was like, all right, well, everything sounds great. Do you guys need anything else from us? Maybe one of the biggest upsides of the console, especially for somebody new coming into using it, is how configurable it is. If you wanted to walk up and mix, you can very easily, load one of the templates that's included in the console, type your names in, and go and start doing a show, and it'd be really quick to get set up and start mixing very quickly. But then the other side of that is it's so extensively configurable as far as how you can lay out the tiles and how many different routing scenarios you can do, and patching and getting in and out of the console for analog inserts and MADI, and you can really, really custom tailor it to do exactly what you need. And at the same time, it's still easy enough to get around on, to walk up, see where everything is. The big touch screen is, really easy to look down and get feedback from the console as far as what it's doing. As far as kind of being that middle ground between something that's, really technically advanced and to an extent difficult to operate, and something that's easy to walk up and mix on, I think this is a really great kind of middle ground between those 2 worlds. Because it feels like as far as things that are on the market right now, there's stuff that is really customizable and at the same time really complicated and difficult to operate. And then there's stuff that's really simple, and this kind of marries those 2 things in a way that is easy to use and yet still very powerful. I like the workflow a lot, the way that the surface is laid out, getting around the surface, how configurable it is, and honestly how easily configurable it is. The tile manager page, I think, is the best solution to that problem on the market. Being able to very quickly move faders and rearrange the tiles and rearrange faders inside of the tiles and quickly copy and paste that to the other tiles is the best of everything that's on the market right now that I've seen. Obviously, it sounds great. I mean, and that's been the biggest thing, is I think that there's, I don't think that there's anything, at least that I've used extensively, that can really compare sonically to to the sound that we're able to get out of this console compared to you know, other products on the market. We spend a lot of time on mic placement, and we've actually, especially on the guitars, I'm not really EQing the guitars at all, and that's a huge part of the sound of the show. I mean, it being a five-piece band, the two electric guitars is the bulk of the show, and so we've actually designed a little system where the guitar amps, the cabinets, the cases that the guitar cabinets sit in have hard-mounted brackets that the microphones clip into, and those microphones are always in the exact same spot every day, and we've spent a lot of time because you can hear those subtle differences now, and moving that microphone even a quarter of an inch one way or another makes a huge difference, especially the relationship between the two of them, and so again, like that kind of extra level of detail that we're getting now has really kind of made everybody pay a lot more attention to the really minute details. Talking about how the sonic difference in the console has changed my workflow it's pretty extensive. Like how I approach mixing the show now compared to you know, on the other systems we've been on is pretty drastic, because there's so much more headroom, there's so much more clarity in the bus summing of the console that, you know, I'm not having to, you know, whittle down these big, huge sounding inputs, and then once they're all summed together, they get all mushy, and that doesn't happen anymore. So I'm able to have, you know, to keep these kind of really big tones, and then those combine together, and I'm able to maintain that clarity. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the top end is so much more open. There's so much more clarity and detail, and the stereo image is so much wider that, you know, I'm able to do a lot more things with effects, and I'm able to notice those differences in the effects and in reverb times and pre-delays and things that I was, you know, that I weren't necessarily immediately apparent on you know, other console systems. You know, those things kind of got lost in the shuffle, and that's not the case anymore. That kind of added clarity in the top end I think I actually mix quieter now than I used to, because it sits so much more even. Once I get the mix kind of settled in where I want it, it can sit there, and I can allow the show to have a lot more dynamics than I used to, where you know, previously it kind of had to be squished down into this little tiny package to get that clarity out into the PA, and especially in these big rooms, we're throwing, you know, really long distances, and I'm able to kind of back that out now and open up a lot of my compression and allow the show to be a lot more dynamic than it was. The biggest thing that I'm able to do now that I wasn't able to do before is really more complex routing scenarios. So the stem groups, being able to essentially make groups of groups to set up processing in a way that I wasn't able to do previously. And so, you know, like, for example, I do a lot of parallel compression on the band. So like, you know, I have a group of drums. The drums are both routed to two stereo groups, one which is very heavily EQ'd and compressed, and the other which is not at all. And then I have that same scenario with the cymbals and the guitars, and so being able to have all of those groups and then route that to a band group that gets all of the band inputs and then has a master kind of bus compressor on it, is a scenario that I couldn't really do on any other console outside of using a matrix, and that gets really weird when you're trying to route things to the PA, and you know, I have to have several outputs that go to different recording platforms and to video, and so when you're using the matrix as your final output, because you can't, you know, have groups internally, then it kind of complicates the output routing to the PA and everything. So having those groups and then being able to make, essentially groups inside of groups has kind of opened up a whole nother world of possibilities as far as how I'm able to process the inputs. A fair amount of automation, basically faders and mutes automated for, I just have one snapshot for every song. And then like the playback channels, the tracks channels, I'm actually able to, those channels are fully automated because there's a handful of songs where there's like some different drum loop things and stuff that we use the tracks rig for. And it's because it's like, we have everything kind of split out into stems as far as the loops are concerned, which gives us a lot more control than just having a mono or a stereo drum loop. So having that stuff split out, we get different things down different channels depending on what song it is. So I'm able to automate those channels fully and being able to separate, like, I only want to automate the faders and the mutes on all of these channels, but on these select channels, I want to automate the EQ and the filters and the compression and the stems, and I can separate that, and having that flexibility in the automation to be able to separate those pieces, and especially on a per parameter, per channel, per scene basis, is a level of control that I haven't had previously, which has kind of opened up doors to a lot of different stuff. There's actually one song where there's a drum loop part, and like on the verses, the drum loop is the only thing. There's no real drums, and so I'm having to compensate for the level between when the drum loops are in with the live drums and when they're not. And the majority of what we use the Pro Tools for is sending SMPTE to video to lock the video with the music, and so I actually picked the SMPTE off and I'm running it into the console for this one snapshot, for this one song, and I'm firing several snapshots off of the SMPTE to turn those tracks up and down for the verses, which has been really cool. I've never really messed around with that before, but I was really amazed at how simple it was to set up, and it works great. Obviously, I expected it to sound great. It's the reputation of SSL consoles, and having used them in the studio some, it should sound great. I'd be disappointed if it didn't. But so that being given, I think, the biggest thing for me that was kind of surprising is how easy it was to integrate with the rest of our system, and everything being based on 32 channel MADI makes integrating it with multi-rack and integrating it with our multi-track recording rig and doing virtual sound check, and how it integrates with all the other pieces, and being able to stay at 96K. I mean, all the PA drive is 96K, so once it hits the preamp, it does not get converted back to analog until it's inside the power amp for the speakers. And so, having that flexibility and how it integrates in with the kind of workflows that we were already used to doing really surprised me, as I expected it to be much more complicated than it was, and it's turned out to be really simple, and made integrating, and especially using both consoles, monitors and front of house, and sharing the preamps. That was another thing that I was a little wary about coming in, is doing gain sharing and only having, the monitor console is the master, and so I don't have preamp control here, and it really hasn't been an issue at all. We've had the gain tracking, like when adjustments are made, I've never noticed it, and being able to select that on a per channel basis, those levels are not necessarily the same. So those preamp levels change, and being able to automate that, and then, obviously I don't want those channels to be gain shared because it's just going to offset the automation that the monitor console is doing. So being able to individually select that on a per channel basis, and how easy that system is to use and how fluidly it works really surprised me. From a monitor standpoint, and far as the performance that we're getting out of the console in the monitor mixes, the band has been able to customize and hear exactly what they want to hear so much better on this system than what we had previously, where even in switching to this console, it was like, we had band guys asking to pan things back closer to the middle, and because there was the stereo image was too wide and there was too much separation between things, and so, having that added clarity has made a big difference in the in-ears, and wireless in-ear technology has come a long way in the last couple years, and so, the sound that they're able to get in their in-ear monitors is way better than what we were able to do previously, and it really kind of has enabled them to focus on that more, and we don't spend time chasing monitor mixes around, like we used to, and so that's been a really noticeable difference. It's all in-ears. There's no wedges, and the stage actually, for as loud as the band plays, is very quiet on stage. All the guitar amps are facing up stage. There's no wedges. There's no side fills. So that is great for me because it gives me a really clean isolation between all of the inputs, and gives me a lot more control over things than I would have if we had a really loud, if we had a ton of stage volume. And so it's great in that regard because it kind of gives Evan and I a lot more control and not having to fight with things bleeding into each other on stage. We do. We multi-track. We use the SSL live recorder, and we record 64 channels every night. And that doesn't get archived or anything. We just use it for virtual sound check. But I mean, I had not used virtual sound check previously, and so having that functionality is, I mean, that's been maybe the biggest change in our workflow, as far as, I mean, especially with me and Jeremy, our system engineer, and how we tune the PA and it's totally changed our whole workflow leading up to sound check. Having that functionality and being able to quickly switch back and forth has been awesome. Do I like my SSL? I love it. It's been great. I mean, this is transitioning from what we were doing in the past, and I couldn't be happier with the ease of use and the sonic quality that we're getting out of it. I mean, I'm continually encouraged that I feel like we made the right decision in going to this platform, and I know that Evan feels the same way, that we're both very pleased with where we ended up, and I think I look forward to continuing to kind of grow with the platform, and as software updates come out and we get new functionality, and things are always getting better, that continues to make it worth growing with.